Have you ever been in a situation where one single act of kindness can change the course of the lives of strangers and of those around you, that would cost you in a way you wouldn't have imagined? How would it feel if someone had the chance to lend you a helping hand and actually did it with no obligation to do so? A stranger, a person you have never met before. Would you take the hand? Would you refuse it? Let me tell you about a young woman, Brindie Crest, 29 years old. She is the number 5 contender to the female featherweight boxing world title, and she already had a shot at the title. We will get to it later. So, let's start from the beginning. Her father, Ryan Crest, was a successful businessman. Strategic partnerships built a wealth that made him sleep easy at night. If he played it right, he would never have to worry about money ever again in his life. He would make sure of it. It was on a business trip to Japan when he met Megumi Watanabe. She was a waitress at the hotel he was staying at. One glance at her, and he fell in love with her. There is nothing wrong with that unless you are in a relationship, and Ryan was in a relationship with another woman back home in El Paso, a woman who he had a 2-year-old daughter with, named Ava. Ryan left that woman and his daughter behind. He stayed in Japan, managed his company and contracts from there, established new partnerships with companies in Japan and Southeast Asia. A year later, Megumi gave birth to a baby girl, which they named Brindie. On the outside, they looked like a happy family, but there was one small detail missing: a wedding ring. Ryan never divorced his wife, paid the minimum child support, and was done with it. Never in her life, Megumi expected that to happen to her as well, but it happened. Ryan went back to El Paso, and he brought Megumi and their daughter Brindie with him. It took him only 4 more years to be done with Megumi. It was a rainy day in October when he packed a suitcase, called a cab, and was gone. Megumi barely got by. She moved into a small apartment in one of the darker parts of El Paso where the paint peels from the walls and neighbors could be heard arguing through closed doors. The heater worked once in a while, but mostly it didn't. She found work in a diner that paid enough to keep the lights on and food on the table. She took double shifts whenever money was tight, which happened on a regular basis now since Brindie went to school. Field trips, school supplies, new clothing for a fast-growing girl. Money ran like water runs through fingers of an open hand. Brindie was not an A student, but she wasn't a bad one either. However, there was this boy who started to pick on her when Brindie was 12 years old. That's when she started boxing at a local gym. She took to boxing like a fish takes to water. Her coach was impressed by how fast she learned, and at the age of 16, he let her enter the ring for her first official fight as an amateur. She made him proud. With a flawless victory, a second-round knockout win over a 19-year-old woman with 4 fights under her belt, of which she had won 3 by way of knockout. Megumi had never been enthusiastic about her daughter's ambitions, but she saw the fire in Brindie's eyes, and being able to defend herself kept the bullies away from her daughter. Fate struck on a cold December night. Rain had fallen in the evening, and the streets were as slippery as ice after the temperature had dropped below freezing point. Megumi had finished a double shift at the diner when she stepped out, tired, her back aching. She was on her way home, a 10 minutes walk from the diner, when a delivery truck lost its grip, slid onto the pavement, and slammed right into the small, unsuspecting frame of a woman. If she hadn't cleaned the tables to become mirrors, or if she hadn't talked with her colleague for 5 minutes after her shift had ended, she would have been home safely, but she died right there on the cold pavement. And her last thought belonged to her beloved daughter. Brindie was 18 years old when she buried her mother. The second blow followed 6 months later. Ryan Crest, her father, died in a ball of fire when his private jet's engines exploded. Rumors had it that he had made himself some serious enemies when he tried to take over another company. Brindie didn't shed a tear, didn't attend the funeral. To her, Ryan Crest was a stranger, a man she barely knew. She hadn't seen him in 14 years, and he was the reason why her life and that of her mother had been only a fraction above misery. However, when she received a letter from an attorney's office weeks later, her life took a turn. The letter was stamped, signed, very official, and it contained a number with so many zeros that it made her head spin for a second. The only thing she had to do was to go to the attorney's office, verify her identity, and leave a bank account number. She did all that, and when she left the office, she spoke to herself that this was the minimum of what her father could do. And that was the extent of her grief. No tears, no drama. Brindie was clever enough to let the bank manage her new wealth. Good investments with minimum risk not only kept her wealth in place, but let it grow. Even her money earned money, and at the age of 19, she purchased a farm outside of El Paso. Brindie has always loved nature, and buying the farm was an easy decision to make, not because she wanted to grow crops or raise cattle, but for the sheer joy of living in nature. She furnished the main house the way she felt comfortable, and when the last table was set and the last picture was hung, she stepped outside, looked at the sky, and said in a soft voice and with tears in her eyes, "Mom, I bought us a house." After that, she dropped to her knees and cried the bitter tears of loss. It should not be the last time that she lost someone close to her heart. While searching for a place to live that was located outside of El Paso but close enough to the city, she met a young woman. Her name was Quinty, a stunning beauty with dark skin and even darker eyes. Brindie was drawn to her the moment she had set eyes on her, and she noticed that Quinty felt the same. They got into a relationship that Brindie thought would last forever, but fate had different plans for her. Brindie unexpectedly was given the chance to fight for the world title. Her opponent was the Korean champion Kwak Ju Lee. Brindie trained hard for the upcoming fight, and a month later, she found herself sitting in a seat on a plane heading for Korea. At the night of the fight, she brought her A-game. The battle was long and fierce over 10 rounds. Both women had given it their all, and it came down to the judges' scorecards. In her head, Brindie replayed the fight before the official result was announced, and she came to the conclusion that she had won. There was no doubt about it. She even heard the commentators and people in the audience state the same. Then the result was being announced, and at this very moment she saw the ugly face of boxing. It looked her straight in the eyes. She knew that she had won the fight. Everyone knew it. But the judges stole the belt right from her waist. Silent tears streamed down her face while Ju Lee celebrated with her fans. Nearly unnoticed by anyone, Brindie left the ring. The betrayal left Brindie stunned. The pain was too deep to be swallowed whole, and it shut her social life down for weeks. She didn't call home. She didn't answer messages. When she finally found the strength to go home, she found Quinty in the arms of another woman. This different kind of betrayal knocked her off her feet even harder than being cheated on after her fight with Kwak Ju Lee. She cried her eyes out for days, not knowing how to carry on. In her 19 years of her existence, she had already experienced so much that would break even seasoned adults. Months later, she found 2 young women fighting on her property when she returned from shopping groceries. The woman with long blonde hair was being beaten terribly. Brindie interfered, and at that moment, the blonde woman collapsed. Brindie called 911 immediately. The ambulance came, rushed the woman to the hospital, and an emergency surgery saved her life. Weeks later, the woman returned to the farm, her long blonde hair gone. She was nearly bald. Her hairstyle was barely noticeable. She introduced herself to Brindie as Yezebo Leclerc, and she showed genuine gratitude for saving her life. Brindie invited her to share dinner with her, and because dinner came with some drinks, Brindie refused to let Yezebo drive home that night. Later, they went to sleep in separate rooms, but around 3 a.m., Brindie woke up from a scream that came from Yezebo's room. Brindie hurried over to find her sitting upright in her bed, with eyes wide open in shock and sweat forming on her forehead. Brindie tried to calm her down, talked to her softly, and asked what was wrong. Yezebo had had a nightmare about the fight on Brindie's property that nearly had ended her life. Brindie laid her arm around Yezebo's shoulder, reassuring her that she was safe. Yezebo surprised Brindie when she suddenly took her in a full embrace, sobbing uncontrollably into Brindie's shoulder. Brindie and Yezebo met more often after the dinner at Brindie's farm. They shared the same passion for motorcycles, and they took some long rides on weekends. They slowly created a bond between them that became more than friendship. One day, in an empty diner, Brindie proposed. Yesabo accepted the ring, and later Brindie adopted a little girl from the orphanage. They were a small family now, and they were only one step away from getting married, but the wedding wouldn't happen. This brings us to a Native American woman named Chuli Diamonds. Chuli was born into the Comanche community. She was a lovely child with long black hair, always active, and running around with the children of her tribe. More than once she got injured when she fell from a tree that she had climbed up too high, or when the play with boys got too rough, but she never complained about it. She just went home, let herself being treated, and out she went again. Her parents were not rich. More often than not, they had to rely on the help of organizations that provided food and clothing for underprivileged families. That didn't bother Chuli even if she had to go to bed hungry. The lack of resources was a constant in her life. But she didn't care as long as she had her grandfather around, who taught her how to ride a horse. Chuli loved her grandfather more than anything, and some people had the feeling that she loved him more than her own parents. The saddest day in her young life came when she had to say goodbye to him. A heart attack took him away from her when she was 10 years old. It was a clear, sunny day when she bid her last farewell with a prayer and tears streaming down her cheeks. At the age of 13, Chuli was in full bloom. Boys and young men became interested in her, and her parents saw a chance that they had to feed one less mouth. They gave her daughter to the wealthiest of Chuli's admirers. The marriage was quick and simple. That's when Chuli changed her last name to Diamonds, and she got pregnant soon after. Her marriage was short-lived. One evening, her husband went to drink in a bar where he got into a hefty argument with another customer. It ended with him on the floor and a foot-long blade sticking in his chest. There she stood now, a 14-year-old girl with a baby in her arms. Nobody wanted her anymore. She had lost that magical aura when she gave birth to her baby girl, which she had named Chuki. Her only chance was to move in with her parents again. When Chuli turned 18, she was given a second chance. And what a chance that was. A young man in his late 20s was interested in her, and her parents were more than happy to give her away. What they didn't know was that the man was a registered sex offender. When he left the house, he locked the door behind him so that Chuli and her daughter couldn't leave. As unexperienced as she was, Chuli didn't think much of it. In her mind, the man was just concerned and keeping her safe. To her, it was nearly normal behavior. The man provided for her and Chuki, gave her a home, kept her safe. He was the man. He had the right. That's what Chuli thought. The first crack appeared one night when he came home drunk. He wanted a woman, and he wanted her immediately. Chuli's menstrual cycle had set in, and she wasn't feeling well, so she refused. The man didn't accept a no from her, beat her, and he took her by force. Chuli lay awake the whole night crying. She didn't understand why she was beaten. In her understanding, she must have done something wrong, but as hard as she thought about it, she couldn't find a reason. Once this line had been crossed, the beatings became more regular. Chuli wanted out, but she didn't find an exit. The exit opened itself 1 year later. Chuki was 5 years old. Chuli was preparing dinner in the kitchen, and when she went to the living room to ask the man if he wanted a special dish, she saw him with Chuki. All fuses snapped at once. She attacked the man, but she was not strong enough to overwhelm him. Instead, she got a black eye and a split lip. The man ordered her to go into the kitchen to prepare dinner. Chuli went to the kitchen, but she came back with a frying pan in her hand. The dull sound that it made when the pan hit the man's head surprised her. The man went down hard and didn't move anymore. From here, there was no going back. Chuli took the chance and ran. She scooped up her daughter, opened the door, and she was gone. She didn't even take the time to put on her shoes. For 2 days, she was on the streets without food or water, and her condition deteriorated fast because she carried Chuki for most of the time to move faster. Whenever she heard a car approach that sounded similar to the man's car she had fled from, she dug behind a hedge or a parked car. Footsteps that approached fast made her nervous, and she always had an eye on the people that passed by. Looking over her shoulder became a habit. After 2 days of running away, she reached a small town. People had noticed her, the Native American woman who carried a child on her back. but nobody dared to talk to her or offered help. Chuli passed through the town. Her legs grew tired, and she let Chuki slid of her back. Eventually, they came to a farm that seemed empty. Chuli didn't take a look. She was about to pass the gate to move on, but she was being noticed. Brindie was on her knees by her motorbike servicing it, checking for the oil level when she saw a movement in the corner of her eye. A woman with long black hair was about to pass by her gate, and she was in the company of a little girl. Something in the way the woman walked caught Brindie's attention. Brindie walked over to the gate, and she began to start a conversation. "Hi, where are you going?" No answer, not even a glance. Brindie thought that the woman hadn't heard her, and she wondered where the woman was headed. Beyond the farm, there was nothing but fields and a small forest. "Excuse me, where are you going?" Brindie asked, this time a little louder. The woman turned her head and looked at Brindie through tired eyes. That's when Brindie noticed the bruise under the woman's eye that had turned green and yellow at the edges. She also saw the cut lip that was healing slowly. Brindie immediately understood the situation without asking. This woman had run from a bad relationship. The next thing she understood was that both the woman and the little girl were dehydrated. The dry lips that had cracks in some spots told a story that didn't need any kind of clarification. Brindie knew instantly that they didn't have drunk anything for some time, and she came to the conclusion that they might not have had food either. There was no way that Brindie let them walk one more step away from the farm. Instead, she opened the gate to let them in. The gate screeched in the hinges when it swung open, and Chuli looked at Brindie with the expression that Brindie could not quite read. It may have been caution, or fear, or exhaustion, or relief, or all of them together. Then Chuli's eyes closed, and she collapsed. Brindie closed the distance in a heartbeat, catching Chuli. Chuki's eyes grew big. "Mommy?" Chuli didn't answer. "Mommy? Are you okay?" Fear and confusion was in Chuki's voice when Brindie lifted Chuli onto her arms. "Mommy?" Chuki's voice became more desperate when she called for her mother while following Brindie to the farmhouse. Brindie had assumed that the girl and the young woman that she carried were sisters, because the woman was nearly a child herself, but on the way to the house it clicked. The child was calling for her mother, not her sister. "No way," thought Brindie. "Impossible." Her mind refused to acknowledge the reality that lay in plain sight. While carrying the woman, Brindie noticed the clothing that hadn't been changed for days. Both the woman's and the child's clothing was stained and had an unpleasant smell. The same applied to the woman. Brindie summarized quickly. No water, no food, no clean clothing, no shower. Brindie carried Chuli into the house, followed by Chuki. Once the Comanche woman was out of the sun, feeling the coolness of the air-conditioned living room, she started to stir. Brindie felt it was safe to let the woman stand on her own feet, but she remained near and ready to act in case the Comanche woman's legs gave out under her. Then she seated her visitors on the couch and brought them water. They drank hastily, and Brindie saw gratitude in the woman's eyes. "I'm Brindie Crest." Brindie introduced herself. "I'm Chuli Diamonds, and this is my daughter Chuki," Chuli replied. "You may want to take a shower," Brindie suggested. "I will wash your clothes. You can have some of mine, and I have something to wear for Chuki too." Chuli accepted the offer. Together with her daughter, she went to the bathroom and handed their clothes to Brindie. While Chuli took a shower together with Chuki, Brindie thought about her visitors. Chuli had introduced Chuki as her daughter, not as her sister. This was impossible. She would have more questions for Chuli once she and Chuki had finished showering. Brindie heard that the water had stopped, and a few minutes later, Chuli and Chuki entered the living room. Brindie let them sit at the table where she had prepared something to eat. Beside the plates were a hot chocolate for Chuki and a cup of coffee for Chuli and herself. Brindie let them eat first, and all three of them sat in silence until they had finished. When Chuki couldn't keep her eyes open, Chuli laid her down on the couch to sleep. Then she came back to the table. "I am grateful for what you did for us," Chuli said. "But why did you help us? We're strangers. You didn't have to do that." "I absolutely had to do that," Brindie insisted. "Well, I'm curious. You said Chuki is your daughter. How old is she, and how old are you?" I'm 19, and Chuki is 5. Brindie nearly spat her coffee across the table. And before you ask the next obvious question, Chuli continued, yes, I became pregnant very young. Chuli then told Brindie the whole story, starting from her marriage to becoming a widow, and all through the moment when she had run away from her abusive relationship. Brindie was startled. If she had thought that she had had a hard life, she now learned that there were women who had it even worse. She stared at Chuli with her mouth open for a long time until the Comanche woman broke the silence. I don't want to be a burden, she said. We will leave as soon as our clothes have dried, but I want you to know that I am really grateful. We were starving. Nobody helped us. You were the only one. Brindie shook her head in disbelief. Nobody helped you? Brindie asked. This is insane. Everybody must have seen how exhausted you were, and letting you walk like this with a little child was irresponsible. Brindie's eyes went to Chuki, who was sleeping peacefully on the couch. Then she made a decision. I won't let you leave, she said. Excuse me? Chuli's eyes flew open in shock, and Brindie continued. You have nowhere to go, and this house has many rooms that are unused. They now can serve a purpose. You will stay here. You can fight me over it if you want, and you can leave if you win. Fight her? Chuli thought. No way. I won't fight the woman who has been nothing but nice to us, and she is a lot stronger than I am. So what's the point? Chuli looked Brindie straight in the eyes. She thought about the offer for a moment. Was this woman serious? Would she let us stay? It would be nice to be safe and have a bed to sleep on. Eventually, Chuli responded. Okay, we will stay, but only as long as you want to have us. By the way, how come that you have clothing for Chuki? I have a daughter of the same age as Chuki, Brindie answered. She is out shopping with my fiancé. They will be back soon. Brindie noticed fear rising in Chuli's eyes when she mentioned her fiancé. She understood immediately and calmed Chuli down. My fiancé is a woman, Brindie said quickly, and she saw Chuli's shoulders relax. Then Chuli felt exhaustion start to overwhelm her. Brindie noticed it, and she led Chuli to an empty room that was sparsely furnished, but at least there was a bed. Chuli laid Chuki down carefully. Then she turned around to face Brindie. She thanked her again. Brindie responded with a short nod, turned around, and closed the door. On the way to the living room, Brindie was lost in thoughts. She thought about Chuli's story, the forced marriage, the early childbirth, the violence, the escape. Then she made another decision. Too many women, she told herself, too often. The farm is big enough. I will turn it into a women's shelter. I'll have a new purpose, one that matters. Ysabeau came back from shopping an hour later. Miu, Brindie's daughter, was smiling brightly, holding a new doll tightly against her chest. The noise from the kitchen woke Chuki up. She opened the door and peeked outside. Then she approached the kitchen cautiously. Miu was the first to spot her. She ran over to Chuki, held out her doll, and asked if she wanted to play with her. Chuki nodded shyly. Then Ysabeau noticed the little girl with the long black hair. Oh, hello. Where did you come from? She asked. Brindie turned around. She wanted to tell Ysabeau later about their visitors and the future plans she had about turning the farm into a women's shelter. Seeing Chuki standing in the kitchen with Miu caught her unprepared. Brindie introduced Chuki to Ysabeau, and she told her that Chuki's mother still might be sleeping in the room Brindie had given her. Ysabeau raised her eyebrows. What are you talking about? Why did you do that? Because it was the right thing to do, answered Brindie, and she told Ysabeau about her plans. At this moment Chuli appeared. She had woken up, and not finding her daughter beside her put her in a state of panic. She went to the kitchen, and there she found Chuki playing with Miu. Ysabeau looked at the young woman. Seeing this stunning beauty in her kitchen made her face flush from jealousy. She wanted Chuli out of this house this instant. Chuli noticed the coldness in Ysabeau's eyes, and she felt uneasy immediately. Maybe she should take Chuki and leave as she had planned. But looking at Brindie's warm eyes, she thought she should stay and weather whatever storm might be brewing. Brindie told Ysabeau about her idea of creating a women's shelter. Ysabeau kept her eyes closed for 1 second too long. She did not like the idea, but it was Brindie's house, so she would have the last say in this matter. In the end, she agreed. In the weeks that followed, Brindie took in 2 more women. One was a Mexican woman with a 17-year-old daughter, and one was a young American woman of 18 years of age. Both women had been in toxic relationships, of which Brindie learned about while she was coaching or watching fights. The women were as grateful for the safety of the shelter as Chuli had been. The house buzzed with life now. Besides boxing and coaching her fighters, she managed both her fight club that she had founded as well as the shelter. Brindie was in her element. She spent more time now on her fighters and her visitors. Ysabeau didn't take it lightly. She felt neglected, and she drifted away from Brindie a little more every day. The light-hearted chats had stopped. She became quieter by the day. She was at her lowest when Brindie announced that she wanted to spend a day at the beach. She brought Ysabeau and Miu, but also Chuli and Chuki. While the kids had fun on their own being watched by Ysabeau, Brindie had fun with Chuli in the water. When they got back to the beach, Ysabeau had the impression that Brindie and Chuli had formed a bond of some kind that Ysabeau was unable to name. It was the final straw. Over the course of 2 weeks, Ysabeau kept to herself thinking about the future and her relationship with Brindie. Eventually, when Brindie, Chuli, and the kids came back from shopping, Brindie didn't find Ysabeau. She called for her several times with no answer. Brindie searched the house with growing distress, and when she finally entered their bedroom, she saw it. On the desk beside the cupboard lay a laptop, and on it she found Ysabeau's engagement ring. Brindie instantly knew what that meant. Ysabeau had walked out of Brindie's life, and she wouldn't come back. Brindie had let so many strangers into her heart that they pushed out the one she should have cared for the most. The realization hit her like a freight train, but now it was too late to make amendments. Ysabeau was gone. Brindie took her phone to call her, but Ysabeau did not answer. No more second chances. It was over. A silent tear rolled down Brindie's cheek. Brindie went back to the kitchen, her eyes red. Chuli noticed it, and she understood immediately what had happened. All too well, she remembered the icy stare that Ysabeau had given her when they had met on the first day. "I'm sorry," she said. "This is all my fault. I shouldn't have come here." "No," responded Brindie. "Nothing of it is your fault. I'm the one who is to blame. I should have cared more. I was too blind to see that I was losing her every day a little more. That was me. That was all me." Tears fell freely now, and Chuli laid a comforting hand on Brindie's shoulder. "For what it's worth," she said, "I'm here. I'm right here whenever you need me." Brindie turned around to face Chuli fully, and then she took her in an embrace that felt warmer than an emotional support. "Thank you," Brindie whispered. "Thank you for being here." Maybe this embrace was the start of something new, but only time would tell.